It's more expensive than ever just to get by these days.
It doesn't matter whether it's at the Bowser, at the grocery checkout, when they're paying their rent, when they're paying their mortgage, when they're paying their school fees. Cost of living is their number one issue right now.
Aiming to solve the crisis, the unlikeliest of alliances has formed. Oh look, a sausage dog and a lion. Cute. That unlikely alliance. The Liberals have joined forces with the Greens to co-chair a cost of living inquiry with big hitters like BP, Woolworths and the RBA all slated to appear.
Inflation figures came out 7.8%. That's the highest rate of inflation that we've seen since 1990.
The opposition and Greens possibly keen to turn the thumbscrews on the Albanese government, swept into power on the promise to make life easier.
We will see those energy prices drop by $275 by 2025.
The government came to power less than a year ago promising cost of living relief. The government has stuffed up here because they decided to shoot first and ask questions later.
To add to household woes, today AGL, Origin Energy and Energy Australia hiked their gas rates, meaning Aussies could fork out up to $1,000 more on their energy bills.
We know that people are under real pressure when it comes to cost of living, and that's why we brought down a very responsible budget that didn't put more pressure on inflation.
And while we all know the cost of living sucks, we're hardly on our own here. The UK has tipped into recession with inflation running close to 10%. And the US isn't far behind as the war in Ukraine rages on.
So is this just got to be a political witch hunt rather than have any practical outcomes?
Quite the opposite. Practical outcomes is exactly what we're looking for.
So precisely what practical outcomes can we expect from the cost of living inquiry?
Jane Hume is the Shadow Finance Minister and co-chair of this committee. She joins us now. Jane, there are so many factors already going into the cost of living that are beyond the government's control that we know about and that are global in nature. So how can a committee solve this crisis?
That's a really good question, Waleed, because before the election, Labor said that they had all the answers to the cost of living crisis that's facing Australians, and in fact, it's only got worse. We've seen inflation now at 7.8%. That's the highest in 3 decades. Just yesterday, we saw some retail trade figures come out that showed that Australians are adjusting their consumption patterns because of the cost of living. The aim of this committee is for the Greens and the Coalition to get together, there are Labor members on it too, to speak directly to industry, to peak bodies, to businesses, to consumers, to charity groups and not-for-profits, and to find out from them what their solutions are to the cost of living crisis. Practical, reasonable, implementable policies that will actually genuinely make a difference to Australians on the ground that are really doing it tough right now.
Are you saying that the government isn't talking to those groups?
Well, they said that they had all the answers, but in fact, they've really done very little to help those organisations, those groups, and everyday Australians that we're all hearing from right now. There are ways that you can deal with the cost of living crisis. If the government won't do it, well, this committee will pick up the slack and do what it's not doing.
But they are speaking to those groups, I think, and I don't know if they ever said they had all the answers. They said they were going to tackle it. They've done a few things. They made the submission, for example, on minimum wage, which I think your side of politics opposed. They introduced the price cap when it came to energy. I think your side of politics opposed that as well. It's not as though they've just done nothing on this.
I think if you speak to Australians, whether they're at the checkout, whether at the petrol bowser, whether they're paying their mortgage, paying their energy bills, Australians are really feeling the pinch and they want action right now on the issues that matter to them. So that's why we're hearing from these peak bodies, from businesses, from consumer groups, from people that have solutions that aren't necessarily inflation, fuel more inflation, but might make a difference to those supply chain issues that are causing frictions or directly in people's pockets.
But the inquiry will hand down its findings at the end of November. So what are you going to do to help people now?
Well, that's exactly right. That's why we're in Sydney today, we're going to Melbourne tomorrow, Brisbane on Friday. In fact, we're going to travel right around the country. There's no reason why we couldn't do updates of the committee's findings throughout the year and ideally before the budget, so that the government can have some new ideas, a few more ideas in their pocket that they can implement straight away that will make a difference to people's lives today, rather than in a year's time, in 18 months' time, or in 2 years' time. We can't simply wait for global circumstances to change. We need action today.
Sorry, so you're asking the government to respond to suggestions today that are going to be going before a committee that will then think about them and come back and tell us what they think of those suggestions in November?
Well, there are government members of this committee. In fact, we have 2 government senators that were there today listening to the evidence, asking questions that could go back to their colleagues and make those suggestions on their behalf.
So what's the point of the report then? Why bother with the report in November? You're just holding town hall meetings, it sounds like, that anyone can attend and the government can walk away with ideas. You don't need to report at all, do you?
I think that diminishes the value of what it is that we're doing, Waleed. In fact, this gives an opportunity for anybody to submit to this committee to tell us how the cost of living crisis is affecting them. But more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to hear about, do that proper industry consultation, which some of these industries, let's face it, are telling us has been sorely lacking.
Matt Canavan is saying this is all about holding the government to account for not bringing down energy prices. Doesn't that show that the motive behind this is political?
In fact, this was a committee that was put together in conjunction between the Coalition and the Greens. Obviously, we've all got different ideas of how to deal with the cost of living crisis, but it's important that we hear the same evidence. We also heard today, in fact, my other colleague, Dean Smith, did some interrogation of the charities and not-for-profit sector, who not only told us that the incidence of demand for their services has increased quite dramatically. In fact, the Salvation Army said that 1 in 3 people that come through their doors now say that the cost of living has driven them there, but also that they're facing cost of living crisis on their own. Whether it be the cost of keeping the lights on in their facilities, refrigerators for food organisations, and meal delivery services. So there's lots of things that we can do, lots of practical ways that we can actually make a difference on the ground.
Senator, one thing I've learned in this job is never do an interview at an airport. Thank you very much for your courage tonight. We've got through to the end of this successfully. I appreciate it. Thanks very much for your time.
Good on you, Waleed. Thanks, guys. See you again.